Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be diving into episodes 290 through 294, which will cover manga chapters 406 through 409. And with Frankie having won his matchup with these episodes, we move into Nami and Chopper and their matchups versus their respective opponents, who are extremely tough for both of them. But not only that, as you may have noticed, we're covering 5 episodes on this, and that is because we get a couple of holiday special filler episodes wedged in between the 3 episodes that we're going to go over. So I'll quickly go over those at the end here. So we've got a pretty packed podcast episode. Okay, so synopsis. With Kumadori breaking out of the fridge, it's now up to Chopper to take him down, but with his Rumble Ball still on cooldown, he's going to have to figure out a way to take on Kumadori without having full control of his transformations, while Nami, on the other hand, has to contend with figuring out Kalifa's new Devil Fruit powers, as well as deal with her already superhuman Rokushiki abilities. Alrighty, so on to differences. There aren't too many major differences, just a couple small ones. So in the manga, you don't actually see Monster Chopper slam Kumadori into the ground until after Kalifa smooths out Nami's legs. However, in the anime, that sequence happens before that scene, so they just kind of flip those around. The other thing is the conversation between Lucci and Luffy at the beginning of episode 294 was actually never in the manga. Instead, the next time you actually do see them is when they actually get prepared to go at it with each other. Now, during the catch-up scene with everyone, there is additional scenes and dialogue inserted in each one of the little updates for each character. So in the manga, it actually just shows a building layout of the Tower of Law and shows a single panel as to where everyone is and who has which key at the time. Whereas in the anime, it shows the situation with each character, and there's an actual scene and some dialogue that's attached to each one of them. But they both serve the same purpose, just to sort of catch everyone up so that they know where every character is and what they're doing at the moment, since they're all scattered. The last few things is the scene where Oimo and Kashi get overwhelmed and captured is also added in the anime. In the manga, the next time we see them and the Frankie family, as well as the Galila company, they're already all tied up and captured. And that's after Spandam accidentally summons the Buster Call, so we don't actually see them all get captured before, like we do in the anime. But that's really it. I mean, these are all just kind of like short fillers to add a few seconds so that the episodes get padded out, so it's not really that big of a deal. It doesn't detract from anything. Alright, so on to my thoughts on the episode. So right on the heels of last episode, immediately we see that it's hard for Zoro to control the Sogeking's sword, which has them rethinking the plan, and Zoro going back to the idea of cutting each other's hands off, which Sogeking screams back for Chopper to get there quickly so that this doesn't actually happen. To which we then cut to Chopper confronting an incredibly fat Kumadori after he somehow ate his way out of the fridge. However, he uses his Seimei Kikan to digest the food incredibly quickly and reverting him back to normal. We also get a quick explanation as to how Kumadori learned and acquired his Seimei Kikan ability. And like I said in the last podcast episode, it's not really much of an explanation other than due to his sort of hermit lifestyle and training, he's gained the ability to imbue all parts of his body with his consciousness to control it. But again, that doesn't really explain anything. It's just one of those things in One Piece that I just kind of take at face value. Like, okay, this guy can concentrate really hard and control his hair and other body parts in unusual ways. And Kumadori is definitely a formidable and scary opponent, with both the Seimei Kikan and the use of the Rokushiki make him a deadly force to deal with, especially as we'll see him combine the two later, which backs Chopper into a really difficult corner as he's already used the Rumble Ball, and it's explained that if he uses 2 in a 6-hour period, he can no longer properly control which form comes out. So for the first time in the series, we see Chopper use multiple Rumble Balls in one fight, and it does not go well at all, as none of the correct forms come out when he needs it to, causing Chopper to take some serious damage from Kumadori, including a barrage of hair tentacle shigans. And that's a pretty good use of both the Seimei Kikan and Rokushiki in combination with each other. And all Chopper can do is to try and withstand Kumadori's attack and hope that Arm Point comes out, which it does finally come out, and he unleashes his new finisher, the Cocktail Roseo Métier, I think that's how you pronounce it, which translates to Carving Hoof Cherry Blossom Blizzard. and it has Chopper unleash a multi-hit hoof attack that leaves sakura petal patterns. Man, that's really hard to say. On Kumadori's chest, not unlike a blizzard of cherry blossoms. And it does do a heavy amount of damage to Kumadori, but not enough to knock him out, which leaves Chopper on the ground, unable to move, and starts to get beat half to death with no way to fight back anymore as he's exhausted. And it looks really bad as we get a quick flashback to Drum, of all places, with Dr. Kureha after some failed experiment of Chopper's that went haywire that sets up something that Chopper did that almost resulted in the total destruction of a village in Drum Island and left him in a state of bed rest and memory loss for a little bit, which makes me think, what could this possibly have been? But it must be some sort of an ability that he has with the Rumble Balls. And cut back to the present as Kumadori is getting ready to land the finishing blow on Chopper. It's looking like the end, but we know that whatever that flashback was talking about, Chopper, with the memory of saving Robin, reminding him that he has to put everything on the line, and breaking his promise to Dr. Kureha, he chomps down on a third Rumble Ball, and we get to hear and see what that really means for our furry little friend as he goes from cute, lovable fur ball to something monstrous that loses all sense of self, kind of akin to the Ozaru form in Dragon Ball. And yeah, he grows to be like 15 feet tall with a long torso and long limbs with unruly fur, and we finally get to see what that tease was in the brand new world opening. Chopper has now unleashed a new transformation, the Monster Point. And this transformation looks absolutely terrifying, as he really looks like a mindless and emotionless beast. But unfortunately, this episode ends here, and at this point, episodes 291 and 292 are the holiday special fillers. But I'll go over those at the end. For now, we're just going to push ahead and get to the next canon episode, which is 293. And anyways, getting back to the Kumadori and Chopper fight, at this point, none of Kumadori's attacks have any effect on Monster Chopper. And Kumadori is just shitting his pants at this point. So he's so scared that he can no longer concentrate enough to use his Seimei Kikan, which is pretty incredible. To see one of these powerful guys just completely terrified to the point where they can't even concentrate and use their abilities. And in one instant, Monster Chopper just slams Kumadori into the ground like it was nothing. I mean, this is brutal. He just like wedges him into the concrete. It's crazy. We then cut to Frankie getting the key from Fukuro, and it reveals it to be the number 4 key, which unfortunately is not the one that they need to get Zoro and Usopp out. Or Sogeking, I should say. But from what we know, he and the rest of us deduce that means by process of elimination that Kalifa must have the number 2 key, which is a nice segue to catching back up with that fight, as we see Kalifa is sitting in a bath while Nami is on the floor covered in water and bubbles, incapacitated. And I remember at the time I was starting to get an idea of what her ability was, as I guessed that her ability is like soap or like something called the Sopu Sopu no Mi, or something like that, but I didn't quite understand how that fit with the losing strength. However, in a few minutes, we do get official confirmation as Nami, in her brilliant analysis, she concludes in her mind that Khalifa's devil fruit is the Awa Awa no Mi, or the Bubble Bubble fruit, which Khalifa is kind of taken aback at how right on the money Nami was, and that seems pretty funny. So I was kind of right when I was guessing this when I originally read it. It's interesting here as we get to complete the sort of the zoo animal theme with the CP9 agents, with the first thing Khalifa doing with her ability, even though it's not a zone fruit, she makes herself into sort of a sheep by forming bubbles around her. And so, yeah, just to review, we have Spandam with the elephant sword Funkfried, Lucci as a leopard, Kaku as a giraffe, Jabra as a wolf, Bruno, whose appearance is a bull, and kind of his name is also bullish as well, Fukuro literally translated means owl, Kumadori Seimei Kikan hair acting and being referred to multiple times as an octopus, and then finally Khalifa as a soap sheep. And yeah, you know what's funny? Embarrassingly, it took me years to even catch on to this theming with the CP9, even when Zoro spelled it out for us earlier with his "is this a zoo?" comment. And yeah, I didn't. It took me years to really be like, oh, they are all animals. Which I'm assuming Oda got that from how Toriyama Akira he does his sort of naming conventions with like themings, with the Saiyans being vegetables and like all the Friezas being like cold type things, and yeah, anything. Anyway, he does a lot of that theming with the names. So I'm assuming that's where he got it from. Getting back to the fight, it's revealed that being covered in the soap makes the victim lose their strength and are unable to move properly, which is explained that the soap can wash away anything. Like, of course, it can wash away dirt and other dirt, stuff, but also a person's power and strength, which is honestly really clever on Oda's part because I would have never thought about it like that. And yet again, Oda kind of impresses me with how freaking creative he is with his devil fruit powers. I mean, not only the strength sapping ability is part of that fruit, but an ability to clean something to the point where it becomes all rounded and smooth, which is likely what happened to Sanji. And we then get back to Chopper and Kumadori, where I half expected Kumadori to already be dead. I mean, that attack was brutal, and that was just one slap. But somehow he's still standing, but even with the tech guy, he's still no match for the Monster Point, as he begins to wail on Kumadori, finally finishing him off and just casually disposing of him by throwing him like 10 miles across the island, as Frankie makes his way back up the tower. But because Chopper isn't no longer in control, he can't tell friend from foe and just kind of knocks Frankie back down. Luckily, Frankie's a cyborg and he can take a lot of those hits and the big fall, but it does kind of annoy Frankie apparently. Now we get a scene back to Robin, and Spandam in his sort of hubris starts to boast and waste time. Enough time for Luffy to actually catch up with the three of them. Spandam and Robin go on ahead with Lucci staying behind to face off against Luffy, and we're finally one step closer to the rematch we've all been waiting for, Lucci versus Luffy. And like I mentioned in the differences section, this little brief dialogue between Lucci and Luffy is strictly only in the anime, but it's nice. It's a nice little scene to reinforce that theme I mentioned on the last podcast about how they all need each other and help each other, and that he couldn't have gotten there without the help of Chimney and Gombe, as well as the rest of the crew holding the other CP9 off and getting the keys. We then get an update montage of where everyone is at the moment before we see Spandam hurrying away from where Lucci and Luffy are fighting, but in his haste, he tries to make a call with his Denden Mushi to the CP9 agents to get an update, but it's the wrong Denden Mushi, which horrifies Robin as it turns out he accidentally activates the golden Denden Mushi and deploys the Buster Call on the NES lobby, creating a second ticking time clock because, as of now, they not only need to save Robin before she gets to the gates of justice, but even if they do save her, they need to now get off the island before the Buster Call completely demolishes the island. So now they've got the race against two clocks to beat out, which is pretty crazy. But because Spandam is an idiot, he ends up accidentally broadcasting his entire argument with Robin across the entire island. And Robin then explains the destructive nature of the Buster Call for everyone on the base because she obviously recognizes it while Spandam doesn't. But he also unknowingly lets everyone know that he selfishly is willing to sacrifice all his soldiers, all just for his own pride and promotion. And then Robin, realizing all of this, just screams out to everyone and warns them to get off the island before getting punched pretty brutally and the line cutting off. And we then see reactions from around the island of the impending Buster Call, particularly the Frankie family and the Galila guys, as well as a hilarious scene with Zoro giving the Sogeking a proper name in the midst of all this chaos and dire situation. Like, I love how this is where Zoro's mind is, despite the fact that there's this, like, impending doomsday device coming to basically wipe them all out. He dubs Sogeking, his Sogeking sword, the Hana Arashi, or the Nose Storm, which is a pretty awesome name, and even Sogeking in his freaked out state of mind admits it's a good name, which I find really funny as well. The episode then comes to a close with a taste of the rematch between Lucci and Luffy, which is much more of an even fight this time around, but of course we know neither of them are going all that hard since Lucci isn't using his leopard form, nor is Luffy using Gear 2nd or Gear 3rd, which we haven't yet seen yet. And unfortunately, this is where these episodes ends. These 3 episodes definitely are a little light on the material. It's kind of unfortunate, but at the same time, it's pretty action heavy, so I can definitely understand why it goes by so quickly. But before we end this podcast, like I mentioned, we have a couple holiday fillers that were inserted into this point in the story. So these episodes were aired as Christmas slash New Year's specials for the year 2006 and 2007. And in fact, 291 aired on Christmas Eve 2006, while 292 aired on January 7th, 2007. And they take place as sort of standalone stories, completely separate from the main story, and almost based on what the narrator said, it's almost like an alternate reality. It seems like in a feudal Japan called Japangu, which is kind of an interesting way to word that. Why even mention that? But yeah, it's kind of funny. And yeah, I mean these two episodes are mostly irrelevant, but I remember watching these when they originally aired, and I remember enjoying them, despite the fact that it's like I really want to see what the continuation between Chopper and Kumadori are. I mean, I had already read it in the manga, but I wanted to see more of it, and it was just kind of annoying to have to wait almost nearly a month, basically, before the story continued again. But anyways, the first of the two episodes, 291, sees Luffy being sort of a detective who's tasked to rescue a kidnapped Rika, who's mistakenly taken by Buggy, the crime boss, because he thinks she is the daughter of Totsan, which literally means just father, by the way, to make him pay for his debts, and it's up to Luffy to get her back. And in fact, the whole misunderstanding that stems from the whole Totsan thing is predicated on the fact that Totsan is father, and everybody refers to him as such, even though that's his name, but it sounds like Tosang, which is dad. And so that creates some confusion and misunderstanding on Buggy's part, thinking that just because Rika calls him Totsan, he assumes that Rika is his daughter. There's also a B plot where Nami buys a New Year's lottery ticket, which ends up winning the jackpot, but Lashes, the camel, ends up eating the ticket. And which is interesting because there's the lottery ticket, and then in the next episode you have the whole mochi jackpot. So it's like this kingdom or this country is giving out a lot of free money on New Year's. And I think the cool thing about these specials in both of these is that we get to see characters that we haven't seen in a long while, like Rika from Shell's Town, all the way back in the beginning of the series, or the Usopp Pirates, as well as Lashes, Mr. 3, Vivi, as well as the Buggy Pirates. And we get to see like combinations of characters, as I'll talk about throughout this sort of section, that we would never get, um, and yeah, we don't ever see even in the future of the series. Like for example, there's a moment in the second episode where we see like Patty talking to Pagaya and Konis, like Patty from Baratie and Pagaya and Konis from Skypiea. Like that is such a weird combination. Or I think that another one in the second episode we get to see is Hachi working with Geratsu, which is another really weird combination. Although they're both now successful business people, according to their cover stories. So maybe they have that in common. But yeah, another really cool thing that we get to see in that first episode is Luffy singing his famous Ahobaka song. We even get to hear a part of the second verse this time that I mentioned in the Skype episode when he actually sings it for the first time. But we also get to see all the kids singing along with him too, which is pretty funny. And we see Luffy actually kind of use a weapon for the first time as he uses a jutte, which is what that thing that Smoker uses, except Smoker's is an exceptionally oversized version of it. But the thing is, all Luffy is kind of doing is he just holds it in his hand and never actually uses it, relying still on his Gomu Gomu attack. So he might as well not have anything in his hand. And we still see Usopp doing his usual running around town screaming that there's trouble, like he does in the main story in Syrup Village. So there's a lot of cool callbacks in this parallel universe as well. But I think one of the craziest things about this first episode is, to our surprise, when Totsan finally reveals himself, he is none other than Panda Man. And I was so taken aback because I never thought Panda Man would ever get focused on in anything. And this is the first time Panda Man is an actual character that's fully animated and interacting with the characters, which is surprising and weird, to be honest. Because up till now, we've only seen Panda Man just kind of like standing in the background or walking somewhere or hiding in like a pattern of people. But this is the first time where people actually acknowledged Panda Man exists and he's moving. And I can't remember if he was actually talking or not, but I think he says a couple words as well. And it's kind of unsettling, to be honest. Also, they use the sort of the regular thin version of Panda Man rather than the sort of the wrestler muscular version of Panda Man that's often depicted in other ways too. But I guess that makes more sense for the story. Also, at the very end, because this is the Christmas episode, we get a little thing at the end for Chopper stating or indicating that he is one of Santa's reindeer as he's working really hard to deliver gifts, which is pretty funny. And it's an awesome reference to his sort of Rudolph inspired origins as the blue nosed reindeer as opposed to the red nosed reindeer. Although Chopper's blue nose doesn't really light up or anything, so I don't know what he's doing. But yeah, on to episode 292, which serves as the New Year's episode, as it follows the gang participating in a great mochimaki race. Mochimaki, or mochi, is a big part of Japanese culture and the New Year's celebration. And I had to look this up, but so it's been around since the Heian period, which is around the 8th to 12th century. The word mochi actually sounds a lot like to hold or have, like motsu, or mochimas. And so, therefore, they believe that it'll bring you good fortune for the year. And so, what a lot of people will do is they'll buy either pre-made mochi or create and make their mochi themselves and create these things called the kagami mochi or mirror mochi, which is this sort of like two-layered mochi with a tangerine placed on top. And they kind of make this sort of small, rounded, three-tiered mini cake type thing. And there's a lot more to this tradition, which I'm not going to get too far into. But if you're interested, you should go read up on it. I actually have a mochi kagami, like a fake one, sitting right next to me, actually, by my TV. You're supposed to actually let it like dry out and eat it, and that sort of kind of helps your teeth and your health. That part I never really understood, and I haven't really bothered to look it up. But if you're interested, definitely go look that up. Anyways, getting back to the actual episode itself, we see Nami, Sanji, and Chopper's little restaurant crew get contacted out to make all the mochi for the Mochimaki event, where the Emperor, which is actually King Cobra in this case, throw a bunch of mochi cakes from the castle to all the citizens down below, and they have to find a jackpot mochi that has a diamond in it to win the 10 million berry prize. However, it's Buggy's scheme to try and rob them and steal the giant diamond mochi so that he can claim the prize money. Personally, I think I like this episode more than the Christmas one. The story is just more simpler and streamlined with some really funny moments and some really unique character interactions, like I mentioned before, that you'd never expect to see. Like I said, Hachi and Gedatsu is a really weird one. Also, the ending is funny with the winning mochi landing on Zoro's unbeknownst to him as he bites into it and has found the mochi with the diamond, but just thinks that he got a bad one with seeds and tosses it like 50 miles to the mountains. With Robin clearly knowing what he just did and just goes ara ara. And yeah, it's a pretty funny moment. I mean, overall these fillers are nothing noteworthy, but they're a fun little detour that's cute and entertaining. And in the holiday spirit at the time, it was really nice. But yeah, the timing was the worst. It leaves you on this huge cliffhanger of Chopper going into Monster Point, so it was really annoying in that regard. But yeah, I mean, quite a crazy turn of events for Chopper, and it'll be interesting to see how he can regain control again now that he's wasted Kumadori. But that will also have to wait, as my next episode will be my 100th. So in celebration of that, I'm actually putting together a special episode and doing a tier list ranking of all the One Piece canon story arcs. That's all the way from Romance Dawn to the current completed Wano arc. So yeah, I hope you all enjoy that, and definitely a big thank you to everyone who supported me through the 100 episodes, or I guess 99 at this point. But yeah, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment, and if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram and Twitter account at SunnyGo Podcast if you want updates of when I post new episodes or see some pictures of my manga collection. And again, thank you for taking the time to listen to the podcast. Just one little note for spoilers. It's going to be like maybe a couple minutes. It's not going to be anything big. But if you're not interested in that, Stay safe out there, and I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye. All right, spoiler section. Just a couple of things. I think one of the things that I wanted to mention though is despite how like terrifying Monster Point Chopper looks in this moment, like I kind of actually do miss how sort of just terrifying and raw power that Monster Point seemed to have at this point because it does seem like something that's like should be revered a little bit. Whereas, obviously post time skip, Chopper learns to control it, and he's even like smiling and being himself, and he even does his sort of his bashful dance, and it kind of like lessens the impact of Monster Point a little bit at this post time skip. And so I did rewatching these episodes, I did really like enjoy the fact that yeah, Monster Point Chopper is scary, especially with that white, his eyes whited out and him just like screaming in that sort of almost like unnatural scream. It's very weird. The other thing I wanted to kind of mention, and this really has nothing to do with anything, but I just found that it was really interesting, is in the holiday specials we see Mr. Three, Galdino, and Buggy team up, and while at the time it seemed like a really weird combination and pairing, that one would actually come to pass when they get to the Impel Downs and beyond. We see that Galdino and Buggy pair up to help Luffy escape the Impel Downs, all obviously also for their own benefit as well. But not only that, but post Impel Downs, once they escape, they basically remain a part of their crew. And so, Buggy continues to gain strength, with one member after another, between pairing up with Alvida, then with Galdino, as well as a bunch of other people. And then now, I mean, this is real spoilers, like very recent spoilers. So as of chapter 1056, we find out that he's created this thing called the Cross Guild and has now teamed up with Crocodile and Mihawk of all people, which now vaults him into being one of the Yonko, along with Luffy, Blackbeard, and Shanks, which is just crazy to me. But yeah, Buggy also has sort of this kind of the similar ability to Luffy, as he can just people just gravitate to him for some reason. I mean, talk about like the definition of failing upward. That's basically Buggy. Not to say that Buggy is weak, but obviously Buggy is nowhere near the strength of like the actual heavy hitters. There's just something about him that seems to attract people, and it works. But yeah, it was just funny to see that. I mean, having just read chapter 1056 and then having rewatched this episode, seeing those two together, and just like I wonder if I mean that has to be a coincidence, but it's just really interesting how that pairing started off. Anyways, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in the spoilers. Nothing too big, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I'll see you on the next episode. See ya.